All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Lakeville Conservation Commission meeting of July 9th, 2024. We're a little bit late starting this morning, but this is a 6 o'clock meeting, and it is for a presentation from Brandon Fruhoff.
Faniff.
I'll
Just
get
don't
it.
call me late for dinner.
Okay. Who has done the off Freetown Street, which we call Rocky Woods. He is our peer reviewer from Ecosystem Solutions, and he's going to make a presentation of his findings of what he found. The original delineation was done by Goddard, and he's our peer reviewer, so he's here to present his findings tonight. So without further ado, so we have time for questions at the end, because this meeting is only 1 hour, we will put ourselves over here so that he can start.
Oh, okay.
Brandon, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can everyone hear me all right? Okay, good. I'll try to project my voice. Again, I'm Brandon Faniff. I am a professional wetland scientist and the principal at Ecosystem Solutions. We are a full-service environmental consulting firm specializing in wetland science and obviously Conservation Commission stuff, for lack of a better term. We've been hired to perform a review of the wetland boundary delineation under the abbreviated notice of resource area delineation for this project that Nancy just introduced. I have about 16 slides here. Now, is the slides going to be on the television as well? Okay. So I'm going to be, the HDMI cord for my laptop isn't long enough to come over here, so I'm going to have to toggle. I'm going to have to swivel between the TV and all of you, so if you can't hear me, just let me know, okay? So again, the property is off of Freetown Street. Okay, here's the overall. You can see it's a very large piece of property. It's 186 acres in size, with Route 140 on the east side and Freetown Street on the west side. Okay, it's undeveloped currently. It's a combination of deciduous forest and coniferous forest, so trees that lose their leaves and the evergreens as well. There's a lot of wetlands, and there are one of the features of this property that I saw, and you'll see it go all up and down Freetown Street as well, is there's lots of ledge outcrops. Okay. There are several old overgrown cart paths as well as a dirt road cutting to a cell phone tower in the northern part of the property. There's several points of frontage on Freetown Street, Howland Road, and County Street. Okay. So what was our purpose here? We've been hired under a piece of law called 53G, which allows town boards to hire third-party independent experts to help them with their reviews. So that's what we're doing. And again, we are reviewing the wetland boundaries and types for accuracy. The view from 10,000 feet is that we found 6 bordering vegetated wetlands. So those are wetlands that border on streams, rivers, creeks, ponds, and lakes. So there's 6 of those that we found. There are 5 isolated vegetated wetlands, and notice there's a little asterisk right after that. Isolated vegetated wetlands, or IVWs, are wetlands that do not border a river, stream, creek, pond, or lake. Why is that important? Because IVWs are not jurisdictional under the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act. And ever since the ruling by the Supreme Court last year, they're not regulated under the federal level anymore either. Which means if they're found to be non-jurisdictional, you can bulldoze them in immediately without further questioning. So the reason why I have the asterisk after it is because, at least, in my opinion, is that at least 2 of those 5 qualify as something called an isolated land subject to flooding, or ILSF, under the Wetlands Protection Act, which would make them jurisdictional. What is an ILSF? It is an area that holds at least a 1/4 acre-foot of water at least once per year. What is a 1/4 acre-foot of water? It's exactly as it sounds. It's a 1/4 acre of land under a foot of water. Or, if you want to do it in more volumetric terms, it's 10,890 cubic feet of water to a minimum of 6 inches in depth. So some of these IVWs that Goddard flagged, they say that they're IVWs. I'm not completely convinced, and we'll get into that a little bit further on. One thing about this property is, before we even step foot onto it, there are vernal pools, and 4 of them have been certified with the Massachusetts Division of Wildlife's Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program. That's the group that certifies them and recognizes them, that gives the vernal pools a little bit extra level of protection under the Wetlands Protection Act. Okay? There are 2 potential vernal pools that Goddard flagged on top of that. So they found more, and we found more on top of that. So I think that there's more work to do. On this map over here, let's see if it's not going to show. See the map? The areas traced in yellow, or outlined in yellow, are the wetlands, and there are little red stars. Those 4 red stars are the approximate areas where these vernal pools have been certified and are mapped. Come on. There we go. Some pictures to give you a general idea of what the site looks like. From the top left, I was talking about ledge outcrops. That's an example of one of them. Top, center, and right, a typical view of the interior forest and wetlands. There's a little blue flag there that represents a wetland boundary flag. Bottom left, some more typical habitat within this property. We got a picture of that area because we found a plant called ostrich fern, which isn't, it's not uncommon, it's just kind of uncommon around this area. There is a ancient glacial lake in this area. Ostrich fern likes very fine silty soils. All right. Bottom center is a typical wetland on site with lots of sphagnum moss, and it makes a carpet of green in the wetland. Bottom right, there's some Atlantic white cedar in there. They're an obligate wetland tree. The only truly, we call the obligate, meaning they occur in wetlands 99% of the time. Those are the trees the old swamp Yankees used to cut down in the wintertime for posts and other things like that, because the wood is very valuable. It doesn't rot, and it's very resistant to insects and things like that. And there's a couple of sentinel-sized Atlantic white cedars right there. Okay, so I told you there are 4 certified vernal pools on the property, and here's a picture of each one of them. The one on top left is within the V for Victory series. Above right, the Z for Zulu series. Bottom left and bottom right. Bottom left is within the Y series, and bottom right is the W series. And one thing I want you to notice is that these pictures were taken in the beginning and middle of June, which is usually around the time that vernal pools start to dry up, and they still had plenty of water this year. As you can imagine, it has been a fairly wet season so far. Okay, and they're pretty good quality vernal pools, in my opinion. There are also some potential vernal pools in here. A couple of them were flagged, and some of them were unflagged. And we described them all in our report, and direct Goddard to think about flagging them in the field for future analysis. Okay. If you have any questions about what a vernal pool is, some people haven't heard about them. Vernal is a word that means temporary. So they are depressions in the woods that fill up with water in the winter and the spring. And what happens, there are certain species of fauna, like frogs and salamanders and certain kinds of invertebrates, like one called the fairy shrimp, that only live or breed within these pools. They are completely dependent on them for breeding, which is why if you certify them, they receive an extra level of protection under the state law. Okay? Which is why I want to point them out. We found countless numbers of wood frogs on site. They look like little bandits. They get the little. They look like they get the little mask on their faces, and they're one of those obligate vernal pool species. So there were hundreds of them, if not more, everywhere. So it gives you an idea that the vernal pools are definitely alive and well and functioning. There are a number of unnamed streams throughout the property. Most of them are intermittent. There's one perennial stream that we'll get into a little bit later. But they are, there's lots of streams forming within the BVWs. Okay, and it's these streams that make those wetlands BVWs and therefore protectable under the state law. When we delineate wetlands, there are three criteria, two of which you need to have. The first thing is you have to have wetland-dependent plants. Okay, we call hydrophytic vegetation. You have to have at least 50% wetland plants in any given area to even start to think about it as being a wetland. The second thing is it has to have the hydrology, and that can be broken down into two things. One is wetland soils, or what we call hydric soils, and the second is just signs of surface or near surface hydrology, that water has been sitting at or near the surface of the ground for long periods of time. And here we have a couple of prime examples of what we call a hydric or wetland soil. And we have a saying in the business, it goes like this: black over gray, stay away. I could have saved myself many thousands of dollars and years in college learning all this stuff if somebody had just told me that to begin with. And you see this, the sample on the left has, it's upside down because I'm holding it using a soil auger, but the bottom is the topsoil, which you can see is black, and underneath it, it's gray to almost being white. These soils usually have a lot of iron in them, which gives the subsoil below the topsoil an reddish or orangish hue. But the thing about iron is that it's, for lack of a better term, it's water soluble. So when the water table comes up, and it stays up for long periods of time, like in wetlands, that iron, it's not like the iron is a grain of sand or a grain of soil. It's more like a stain, and it colors the grains of the soil. And when the water comes up and stays up, that iron goes into solution and moves up and down with the water table. Well, when you're in a wetland, most, if not all, of that iron is going to disappear from the near surface area anyway. Okay? And if you can see close enough, I would zoom in, but I'm not near the laptop. On the right-hand side, you can see a little bit of the remnants of the iron, a little bit of orange in there. But the one on the left is almost completely light gray, meaning it's really wet. And the reason why we took these pictures is because we did make some adjustments to the guarded wetland boundary delineation in some places. And it's because we found wetland vegetation and these soils. And the pictures of these soils came directly from areas that we think that Goddard needs to adjust the wetland boundary to include them. Okay. And this right here is a schematic, just a hand-drawn schematic of where we think that the wetland boundaries need to be adjusted on site, and also where we think the potential vernal pools are. So the red lines with the little dots are areas where we believe that the wetland boundary needs to be brought further out into what Goddard called what they called upland, which is the opposite of wetland. It's the area where you might be able to potentially build. We think that it needs to be expanded in those areas. And the blue stars are potential vernal pools, not certified by the natural heritage people yet, that Goddard flagged. But we found in green, lower left-hand side, more the southern part of the property, 3 potential vernal pools that have not yet been flagged, which we're going to urge Goddard to do at the same time that they go out to make the corrections in those red outlined areas. Okay. And if you want the details about exactly what number flags are associated with any of this, the red outlined areas or where the potential vernal pools are, it's in a report that's available at the front door. Printed about, what, like 100 of them, Nancy?
50.
50,
I think
okay.
that'll cover who's here.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so Goddard delineated some isolated vegetated wetlands, which I told you, if accepted as is, will be non-jurisdictional. The Conservation Commission nor the Commonwealth of Massachusetts will have any power to stop any future owner or developer from just filling them right in. But when we were out there, we noticed that a couple of these areas have a lot of water in them, which makes me think that they may qualify as isolated land subject to flooding. And we took pictures of them so you could see. And the one on the left is the P series, flags P1 through P24, has quite a bit of water in the middle. We think there's enough water in the middle to classify it as an ILSF. On the right-hand side is the N series, N1 through N69, which does contain a certified vernal pool. We think that it also should be considered an isolated land subject to flooding, which is good to know, because even if a isolated vegetated wetland has a certified vernal pool within it, you can still fill it in, even though it's certified. Before the Supreme Court ruling last year, if you filled in more than 5,000 square feet of an IVW, you still had to go to the Department of Environmental Protection and receive something called a water quality certification. Since that ruling last year, that's going to be a lot harder to require. Which is why we think that an exercise should be done by the applicant, including a topographical survey, to determine whether or not it actually holds that amount of water to be considered jurisdictional under state law. There is also a perennial stream located on site. I was just showing you a bunch of the intermittent streams. Intermittent means that it doesn't flow all year round. At some point, it's going to stop flowing and dry up, therefore intermittent. Perennial, however, are streams and rivers that flow throughout the year and never dry up. Why is that important? Is because the law is a little different, treats the two a little bit differently. Well, actually a lot of it differently. Perennial streams have their own, what's called a 200-foot riverfront area, which the 200 feet on either side of the perennial stream is considered a wetland resource area in and of itself, with its own sets of performance standards for work, which are fairly restrictive compared to an intermittent stream, which just has a 100-foot buffer zone, and buffer zones have no performance standards for it. So there's a lot more protections around the perennial stream. Goddard Consulting submitted a letter kind of after the ANRAD was submitted, stating their opinion that that blue line on the left-hand side is in fact an intermittent stream. They gave their reasons. I wrote a rebuttal to it, which is in a letter. It's not in the report, I don't think, at the front door.
Yes, it is.
It is. It's the one on the right.
It's one on the right.
So it's the one on the right. So make sure, if you want the full thing, pick up the report on the left-hand side and the right-hand side. One of those reports explains why regulatorily this river right here is perennial, and it's called the Cedar Swamp River. Okay? I stopped by it today on the way here. Still a lot of water in it. Still a lot of water in it, even right now. Okay? Another thing I want to point out is that there are two public wells, I think associated with the high school. They're shown here in this round circle. It's got kind of a pinkish color to it. And you'll see that the property is outlined in kind of a teal color on the left-hand side. And it enters the property in the very southwest corner of the lot. But if you look at the topographic map on the right-hand side by the USGS, United States Geological Survey, it encompasses the area where the perennial stream is. Why is this important? This is important because this is what's called the interim wellhead protection area for your public well. And one of the things that Goddard Consulting could do is they could do an exercise, if it gets dry enough, to show this stream eventually dries up. And if they take pictures over a certain amount of days, they can reclassify it from perennial to intermittent, which means that that 200-foot wide zone gets reduced to 100 feet, and the level of protection goes significantly down. There's some caveats with that exercise, though. And one of the caveats is that any stream that is shown to have significant drawdowns of water from surface water withdrawals or groundwater withdrawals are exempt. Like you're now exempt from, not exempt, you're disqualified rather from doing that exercise. My opinion is because they're within the interim wellhead protection area of these public wells, that you can presume, Conservation Commission, that there is a significant drawdown of groundwater in this area, and because it falls within that circle, you don't have to accept that exercise. That's my opinion. We'll see how well it holds up. That said, the 200-foot riverfront area associated with the stream stays entirely within the bordering vegetated wetland. So unless someone wants to come in off of Freetown Street, cross over the river and cross through the BVW to reach that lower area of the property, it's probably not really going to come into play. But if it does, it's going to be a very important aspect of your review under the notice of intent. Some qualitative observations, a little outside of the scope of the wetland boundary review, but I would be remiss, and I wouldn't be a very good scientist and biologist and consultant to the commission if I didn't mention these things ahead of time. The property is not listed as being within the habitats of rare or endangered species. However, we found one. And this is something called the eastern box turtle. It's what's called a species of special concern in Massachusetts. So it has protections under the Massachusetts Endangered Species Act. And we found this one at, I have it written down somewhere, but I will sign an affidavit saying that I found this turtle on site. What else did we find? We saw a bobcat. Yeah. Lots of wood frogs. The fern in the top middle right, that's one of the ostrich ferns. My assistant, Samantha, couldn't make it tonight because she's on vacation. She's 5 feet tall. She could be standing behind this little clump of ferns right now. You would never know it because that's how tall these ferns get. There were ruby-throated hummingbirds all over the place. I wasn't expecting to see so many hummingbirds in the middle of the forest, but they were everywhere while we were doing the work. Lower left-hand corner, we got there right after the deer fawning season, which is usually last week of May, first week of June, so there were lots of little deer, little fawns all over the place. Again, those two sentinel Atlantic white cedars. The lower center is a bird called the scarlet tanager. You don't see them too often because they live in the canopy of trees, but they require habitats with mature trees. They like oaks. They like mixed deciduous forests, which means you have the mix of the deciduous and the coniferous. They like hemlocks in particular. And they tend to be, you'll find them in urban and suburban areas, but tend to do better when you have large blocks of unbroken forest. So we heard some of those. They sound like a robin with a cold, kind of like hoarse. Just to the right of the tanager is a royal fern. Nothing special about that, but just shows you some of the variety of the plants that are on site. And on the right-hand side, quite a few pink lady slippers on site as well. They like oak forests. So that's the end of the presentation, and this is the point where I hand it back to the commission and to the public for questions.
Maybe somebody can turn the lights back on, that would be nice. Thank you. So, first we will see if anybody on the commission has any questions for Brandon.
That was pretty thorough.
Oh, yeah, very impressive.
Thank you.
Josh?
Brandon, with you signing an affidavit seeing the eastern box turtle, does that gain us any other protections or no? Or
What I could do is I could fill out a species observation form with Natural Heritage. At your direction, I could submit that to Natural Heritage. What Natural Heritage does with it is up to them. I don't think you're going to be getting a estimated habitat polygon tomorrow, but these are the kinds of things that they pay attention to the next time they come out with a map. The last map came out in 2021, which was a year late because of COVID. So they're due to come out with a new one pretty soon. They come out with them about every 5 years.
what do you need from the commission to draft that letter? Just direction by us? Does it
Direction,
require a
however you
vote?
want it. I would, from the chair, from majority vote, that's your call.
I'll make a motion for Brandon to send that letter to Natural Heritage.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Any discussion?
Oh, discussion. I always forget that part.
So the area has been determined, it's been submitted to natural heritage, or national heritage, natural heritage. And they've basically said that it is not an area of
Endangered species.
right.
Well, you
No,
know,
I'm
if
just-
things
I'm
go
just-
off the map,
I
it could have been
understand.
at one
I
time.
understand, I'm
Okay.
just asking the question though. So they have determined that it is not. We have that letter?
There's no letter, there's a series of maps. They used to make them on actual paper maps that were like huge.
Yeah.
And you had to buy them for like $25. Now it's all online.
Okay, because when I did my septic, I had to submit to them, and they sent me a letter saying it's not a,
Right. So at the moment, the applicant, when they come in for a notice of intent,
Yep.
which we presume they will do, they won't have to do any of that because they're not within one of these areas.
okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Your septic, your project probably fell within
Oh,
one
it
of their
absolutely
mapped
did, yeah.
areas already.
Yeah.
And that's why you got a letter back.
Okay, that's all I wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Nancy was right in that, sorry, Chair was right, correct, in that it may have been at one time, but
Yeah.
these maps are always changing.
Okay,
And when they don't get observations, if nobody sends this letter to them like
Yeah.
we would do, and a few years go by, well, nobody's made any observations, and seeing as
Yeah,
a lot of this
understood.
is private property, probably people aren't traipsing around back there looking for box turtles, so.
But here's one thing, I learned the hard way when it comes to rare species. The entire Commonwealth is under the jurisdiction of the Massachusetts Endangered Species Act.
right.
These areas that they map out are, I guess you could call them hotspots, okay? But the Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program, they have the right to take jurisdiction over any property anywhere in the state at their leisure.
Right. Understood. Okay.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Do we want to do a roll call vote, or do we want to just say all in favor?
All in favor?
All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
All right,
Aye. Aye,
Shall be done.
thank you.
okay. Anybody else? Okay, at this, oh,
I have one more question, and it's
Okay.
more just to get it on the record than anything else.
okay.
Brandon, you said that the Cedar Swamp River, the 200-foot riverfront was still within, mapped within the 100-foot buffer of BVW? Is that correct?
I think in the end it will be.
Okay,
What I'm, so the applicant they're not required to flag it.
Mhm.
You just won't verify it.
right.
So if they come in with an NOI, there'll be more to scrutinize and more to question,
Mhm.
right? If they flag it, then you'll know for certain. I was just doing what I call ocular estimation, you know, because I'm a professional and I don't eyeball. I do ocular estimation. I also don't have gut feelings. I have visceral intuition. So my ocular estimation is that it will stay within BBW.
And again, just to get it on the record, what would, which resource area would supersede? Would it be the riverfront or the buffer zone?
The riverfront area.
Thank you.
Okay? We're good? All right, at this time, I would open it up to anyone in the audience that would like to ask a question. Actually, I think it was a really good thing. We all learned a lot tonight.
It was fantastic.
It was very good. Come up to the microphone, please, and give us your name and
Michelle
address.
Belliard, Little Farm Road.
Okay?
Thank you, Brandon. Nice work.
And through the chair, you can
Yes.
ask Brandon the question.
Brandon mentioned that he observed some potential vernal pools. Is there anything that can be done to submit an application for certification?
The way that Natural Heritage deals with vernal pool certification, they really don't care who does it. They don't even care if you trespassed on the property, do. Is it necessarily the right thing to do? Not really, but they accept everything. When we were out there, we did see a lot of wood frogs hopping around the woods, which means that most of them were already out. You know, they've already hatched and matured and were out. So it was not part of our purview to document the vernal pools, so we didn't. We just noticed the areas where we think there's a high likelihood of it being a vernal pool. And what I'm going to do, what I have done is I've urged in my report that these areas eventually do get investigated further, and if they qualify, be certified. So I didn't do the investigation myself, if that's the question.
And who would certify? National Heritage?
Preferably the applicant owner through their consultant,
Okay.
which is something you, in my opinion, you can compel under the notice of intent, but anybody can do it.
Okay.
So you're in a very kind of a sweet spot between the ANRAD and the notice of intent. Conservation Commission, anyway, has authorization to go on the property. When there's no application, it's truly private property, but it's not truly private property right now because as part of an application, it gives assent for certain, people associated with town board to enter the property. So if you wanted to go there and do an investigation, you could.
We have to answer their ANRAD with an ORAD.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that would be part of it. And I do have to say that I've had calls about people wanting to trespass, and I've been very firm about people not trespassing on the property. But that said, the commission has that permission, and I would say that even though none of us would probably want to go and be the one to certify it, that we could encourage Goddard and the applicant to have those vernal pools certified.
Eventually. So one distinction I want to point out is that vernal pools are not wetland resource areas in and of themselves. Okay, a vernal pool is not, it's within a wetland, but it's not a wetland type itself. What it is it's a special subset of wildlife habitat. So vernal pools are protected for the wildlife habitat values. And it also, if they're within a bordering vegetated wetland, and they're certified by the Natural Heritage folks, they become what's called a Category B Outstanding Resource Water under the Water Quality Certification Regulations. Which means that if you want to fill in 1 square foot of a certified vernal pool, you have to apply for something called a Water Quality Certification. And to my knowledge, a certified vernal pool has never, ever been allowed to be filled in under a water quality certification application. They completely prohibit it, which is why certifying them is a good thing to do, especially in the areas where you may have to do a wetland crossing to get from point A to point B. There might be a vernal pool in the way.
That was all. Thank you.
Hi, Noelle Rillo, Lakeville. I just, it sounds like you really documented everything there, the biodiversity, the vernal pools and all of that. I'm wondering about the ledge. If blasting operations were to, I don't know if you encountered this or have an opinion about it, but if blasting operations were to be undertaken on that property, given the freckling in the many different areas of all of these pools, what would the effect be on both the vernal pools and the wildlife in there, and the wellhead that you mentioned, which is near the high school? Can you comment on that? Thank you.
I'm going to refrain from the wellhead because that's kind of not really wetland related. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the blasting in vernal pools, I don't know of any studies that have been done that documents that kind of thing. I think common sense would tell you there'd be some kind of an impact as far as, concussion. But the problem is that the Wetland Protection Act focuses on land disturbance, not so much like, say, concussion from a dynamite blast. So it kind of
It's not in your wheelhouse.
It's not really in the Wetland Protection Act's wheelhouse to deal with the effects of blasting on vernal pool fauna.
And let me ask you, is there any kind of specialist who could provide that kind of insight into a geologist?
If there is, I've been doing this for 26 years, I know a few people. If there is someone that knew something about that, I would be able to find them. But I
You
can't think
could.
of anybody off the top of my head.
But you would have resources to seek that out.
I would. And I'm
Thank
not
you.
going to guarantee that I'll be able to
Thank you.
find someone, but I know, I already have people on the top of my list
Great.
that I would call.
Thank you very much.
Were you able to see?
Oops,
sorry.
you gotta
Oh,
identify yourself.
Sorry, Cora
Okay.
Purse from the Narragansett Indian Tribe.
Okay.
Did you see any salamanders while you were out there? Because we had noticed them on the Freetown side.
We did not. I think the salamanders might have already been done by June, they're
That's true.
they're just, think about the difference between the wood frogs and, say, the spotted salamanders. The wood frogs stay above ground, they're in the brush and they're going everywhere. Salamanders, they look for a hole right away. So they're in the family called the mole salamanders because they like mole holes.
Right.
What they do is they find themselves a little mole hole and they set up shop and they wait for little insects to go by and then they just grab them. So they're underground, so they're not as easy to find.
Right.
They're under logs and things
And
like
all
that.
of the rock crops.
Yeah,
too.
under rocks and logs and things like that.
I know you didn't want to talk about the public wellhead, but what about all the individuals on Freetown that have wells? I mean, does that impact? Because we know that this water goes through a culvert under 140 to go into the Cedar Swamp to Long Pond. So, I'm wondering what the impact of disturbing such a vast area of uplands is going to do to their wells, let alone Long Pond's health,
Well, all these wells, and remember that one of the public interests of the Wetlands Protection Act is public and private well supply.
Mhm.
So a wetland's ability to provide water for wells is one of the things that the Conservation Commission is charged with protecting, right? Because wetlands are the places where water tends to congregate and then goes down in through the soil column and into the deep groundwater. So it's the areas where most of the recharge of your groundwater is happening, right? So if you have a lot of land clearing and you have a lot of new impervious area, that changes the dynamic and the flow of the way the water moves, the Conservation Commission has to do the analysis to see, do they think that the impacts to the wetlands are going to affect the way that the groundwater is supplied that then supplies your public and private wells. So it is one of the things the Conservation Commission will eventually have to look into.
So, which would, all of that kind of fill will impact the water quality overall for both public and private?
It has the potential, and what applicants eventually do is, like, you know, if they're gonna do what I've seen that they're gonna do, there's gonna be a lot of civil engineering, and part of that engineering is stormwater analysis. And the stormwater from the roads, the rooftops, the driveways, all have to go into a stormwater management system where that water then gets treated. And what happens is right now the water just comes down through the forest and it seeps into the ground everywhere and anywhere and everywhere. Whereas once it gets developed, it's going to be hitting point A and then being quickly transferred to point B, usually to some kind of a swale or a basin where the water gets concentrated and then it goes into the ground in that one spot. So where you might have, you know, several acres of land where the water is now just sheet flowing and naturally going into the ground, is now going to be transferred to, you know, one much smaller spot, not necessarily where it fell, and go into the ground in that area.
When you talked about the vernal pools or the potential vernal pools, we have 4 already certified, and then there were at least 2 other potential. Now, you studied the 185 acres, not the full property that's owned, right? So you just stayed to phase 1, so to speak. You didn't go all the way up to 140?
In fact, yeah, I'm glad that was asked, because the site plan is different than the map that Goddard Consulting provided in their report. Goddard Consulting showed them larger property, especially to the north, and they showed more wetlands to the north that are not on the official site plans. So we got a little confused at the beginning, and we were actually reviewing some wetlands that are technically not part of the ANRAD application. So yeah, there is more property.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Michelle McGecker, 99 County Street. Madam Chair, through you.
Yep,
I
you
was
gotta
hoping-
speak up, so.
Sorry, I will.
Okay.
So I was hoping that perhaps peer review could shed a little light on a potential for a MIPA review. I did notice that on the town website, the state and federal permitting that have been presented by the applicant, I don't see a MIPA review, but I do see Title 40 of the Code of Federal Regulations listed. Does that include a MIPA review? Will there be a MIPA review as well?
I've seen the proposed plans, and here's what you do. You just Google Massachusetts MIPA thresholds, and it'll come right to a document that has the section of the regulations with all the thresholds. And there's a lot of them. Wetlands, endangered species, traffic, water, sewer. There's a lot of different components to it. I would say that there's a higher than likely, it's the best way, more likely than not, there will be a MIPA review.
But not at this stage of the game.
Not at the stage in the game.
All we're looking at tonight is the delineation of the wetland, the streams, and what resource areas we'll have to, like I say, they submitted an ANRAD, we'll have to answer them with an ORAD. Order of resource area delineation, so we will have to see. This is just a meeting for the presentation from Brandon, and we're gonna continue this to our next meeting on the 23rd, where Goddard will have a chance to respond to what he says.
So I guess my reason for asking about this is because I know MIPA also has their own public comment period as well as a site walk with their experts, so I think that it would be great to make sure that that happens as well. And I know from other projects in town, the MIPA process has gone at the same time, moving forward as the town reviews as well, which I think kind of helps because it takes them longer to get through it. So if a project's already permitted and there's more comments, that could create a conundrum,
Right,
I
and that
guess.
would be in the next phase is after we come to an agreement between both parties of what the resource areas are. Before they can start any kind of construction, they'll have to do a notice of intent, and it would come
That's when
in
they're-
that
okay.
stage of the game. Would
Okay.
bring all those other things to light when they actually say what they're gonna do there.
Right.
Because all we're saying right now is this is where the wetland is, and these are the areas of protection, and we're gonna make sure they're protected.
Okay.
Right, and through the chair, before you even think about submitting for a MIPA review, you have to nail down what the wetland resource areas are and where they are, otherwise it's just speculation. Anyway, so this is step one.
Right.
And now, just building off of what Cora had asked about the water quality, is there a potential for the school water quality to be affected? Because of the location of that potential perennial, or the question of whether it's a perennial or not stream?
I think at this point it's speculation. You need to see a notice of intent with a plan.
Okay. And then, because you found certain endangered species when you were there, is there any way of checking for more? I believe Cora had spoken at a planning board meeting prior, saying that she had witnessed a rattlesnake there, which is, yes, I would think it would be something worth,
Brandon's glad he didn't miss that one.
but knowing that,
Never
you
saw
know,
somebody
that,
leave so quickly, was my friend Elaine.
so I just thought, maybe it would be, is there any other way of getting sort of eyes on any other potential endangered species out there?
Well, I would think, once Goddard responds to and they go out there and do some more flagging of the areas that you had said you wanted some additional flagging, and then maybe he would be back if they're on site some more. That
Correct.
maybe they'd keep their eye open, like you're gonna watch
Yeah,
for a
and
rattlesnake.
right, yeah, I'm gonna remember that. Yeah, so that's really the only way I can do it, is because the purpose here is just to verify the wetland boundaries, not to go looking for endangered species. However, I can keep my eyes peeled while I'm out there looking at the wetlands.
You will now.
I definitely will.
They like to stun themselves on the rock ledges by.
Well, we also voted to notify natural heritage. that-
Right,
That's
of
a good
the-
point.
right.
There's a lot of it.
They
Right.
need to take
Climb
steps.
ahead, you gotta watch where you put your hand.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, you know what, we noticed.
Anybody else? We have 3 minutes left before we have to close this and open our regular meeting. Well, I would like to thank everybody for coming.
Thank you, everybody.
The reports are right by the door on your way out. Remember, there's two. There's our original and a supplemental. There were two. I understand one was online, the other one was not, because it came later in the game. So take both. They'll all be up on the conservation website on Monday. Our secretary's on vacation, but when she gets back on Monday, it will be on the conservation website. And you're always free to call the office if you have any more questions. And you're welcome to come to our meeting on the 23rd for the response of Goddard to everything that we've talked about today.
Will it be here, Nancy?
I think with this turnout, you can see I put all these chairs out because last night there were 80-something people at the zoning board meeting, so I was trying to be prepared in case that a lot of people came. But I think that we'll be able to maybe be at the library or the police station, because if this is going to be how the turnout looks, this was a lot of work for people to come and set up all these chairs, so we'll try to avoid that if we're really not, except with my luck, I guess. We'll put up a few chairs and 100 people will come, but we'll try to figure out either the police station or the library, but it'll be posted.
Will it
So,
always be at 6?
no, I'm not, we'll see how much is on our next meeting. Like I say, I didn't know how many people were coming, and I find a lot of times that people get up and ask the same questions, or just, you know, get upset that they don't want it, and so I was just trying to contain it to an hour, so Brandon could make his presentation, and you could ask a few questions, so, we'll try to have it at the police station, because that's what we're signed up for, but if I get a feeling more people are coming, then we'll do the library. I think this was a little bit of an overkill, but I would rather be prepared than not.
So could you reiterate that meeting on the 23rd? Will Brandon be there with Goddard?
No, it will be Goddard responding to
Goddard
Brandon,
Okay.
unless, well, let's see what we get from a response from Goddard to see if they don't agree, then we might need, that's something we'll have to decide.
And I'm not sure they're gonna have enough time. I mean, I gave them a lot of work to do.
Okay, so you should keep your eye on the agenda, because if it's gonna be continued, I'm gonna continue it to the 23rd, and then we can just continue it further from there, but it will be on the agenda. I will call out just to continue. Okay, but I think that they've already started to work on it maybe, so we'll see. But just keep your eye on the town calendar for the agendas.
Thank you for the education. It's very enlightening.
There's a lot of concepts.
Yeah.
Do you need a vote to,
I need a motion to adjourn.
what about to,
Oh, yeah, I do. I need a motion to continue to 7:23
so moved?
Second.
at 7 o'clock.
Yes.
Okay, all right, yeah.
Nancy,
Yeah.
do you need to specify a location?
I need, wait a minute, I need a, oh,
We didn't vote?
we didn't vote yet. We just,
Oh, okay.
hold on.
At the police station.
Lakeville Police
All right,
Station.
all right, nice and loud. Motion to continue to 7:23 at the Lakeville Police Station at 7 o'clock.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brendan.
Thank you.
That was fantastic.
I'll practice your name.
It's Keats, right?
Huh? Yeah,
Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Okay, now,
Right on time. Nice.
Yeah. Well, it's not half of what I expected, so.
Not even close.
Okay, so do we have countdown to the next meeting?
Yeah, you can do another 10 seconds.
We need to adjourn our first meeting.
Oh,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Ready whenever you guys are.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to the July 9th meeting of the Lakeville Conservation Commission at 7 PM. I need to ask if anybody besides LakeCAM is recording. Obviously not, there's nobody here. So we are being recorded by LakeCAM. Okay, first item on the agenda is 310 Kenneth Welch Drive. I talked to Goddard Consulting and they have asked to be continued to 7:23.
I
So
make
I-
a motion to, why do I keep forgetting that word?
Continue.
Continue 310 Kenneth Welch Drive to July 23rd.
Second.
At 7
At
o'clock at
7
the
p.m.
Lakeville
at the
Police
Lakeville
Station.
Police Station.
All
Second.
right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 9 Cross Street. Okay, I talked to Niles and he's looking for, they had, the Board of Health is making them do some perk tests over there. Because I guess the perk tests that they had done previously were old and Ed wanted them to do it again, so Niles has asked for a continuance to 8/13 on this one.
So moved.
All right, so we are continuing 9 Cross Street, SE 192-902 to August 13th at 7 o'clock at the Lakeville Police Station.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
2 Bedford Street.
What's up with that?
That's continued too. And I'm hoping it's 7:23. I got continued 2, blank. All right, so they have asked for a continuance too. So I will say we need to make a motion to continue 2 Bedford Street to 7/23 at 7 p.m. at the Lakeville Police Station.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. 9 Christian Brook. I went there today. I mean, it's been, I forget how many years, 19 years, I think, since,
Well, 502 is the number, how far back is that,
right.
right?
And everything's grown in really nice. The man who came out was very confused why I was there because he just bought the house. He's been there for 3 days, so I guess this is a certificate of compliance after the fact. Everything looked fine. And let's not forget to sign the paper before we rush out of here. But to me, everything looked fine, so I would say yes to a request of a certificate of compliance if somebody would like to make the motion.
I'll make a motion to issue a certificate of compliance for 9 Christian Brook Lane, DEP file number SE 192-502.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now, we need to ratify a vote for the enforcement order. I guess, looking at the tape, Nate had picked up the fact that the vote was made to issue it for 162 Bedford Street instead of 160. I sent out the enforcement order to 160, like I think the day after our last meeting, so,
I'll make a motion to ratify the enforcement order for 162 Bedford.
no,
No. Okay, 160 Bedford.
okay.
But I would still believe that there is enforcements to be had on 162 as well.
Okay,
I think it's worth investigating.
okay, why?
Well, I'll second that.
Okay.
All right, okay, so we're gonna ratify the motion is
160.
to ratify the motion for the enforcement order for 160 Bedford Street.
Correct.
So moved.
Yeah, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
okay. Now, what's the story about 162?
I thought when I had looked at some maps that there was potential violations there as well. I'll do a little more homework and I'll justify that.
Okay,
For our
that,
next
John and I
meeting.
went and looked at 162, and the area, their violation is with Mass DOT because they cut out onto Bedford Street when they were
Without a-
cutting the 2 lots.
Without a permit.
Those 2 lots, they're trying to clear to sell. But when you look at the map, they did not, there's an isolated land, or is it
Isolated.
ISLF or
I
a,
think
ISLF is protected. Isolated vegetated wetland is not
Is not,
protected.
yeah.
I think it was an isolated vegetated well.
So here, why don't I do this?
Okay.
I will gather some more information and give my recommendation at our next meeting.
Okay, all right, that sounds fine. I think they're being impacted, not on the side where the cutting is, but John and I, they are being impacted by 160 because 160 has put up a huge berm around and cut a hole in it to drain their parking lot. So that's part of the reason for that violation.
So is any of the clearing of 160, because we believe it to be them, located on the property of 162
No way to tell.
No.
without
We
having
don't
a
know.
survey?
Well, 162 did their own clearing.
Yeah, but we don't know how far they went.
That's true. Well, that was part of the
I
enforcement
know
order.
there's a road. There's that
In
logging
between,
road in
right, that we
between
went
that
in
we
the-
went
yeah.
down. So we don't know.
Right. Well, that was part of the enforcement orders to find those boundaries. We want to know where the boundaries are, and we are also going to, the man who lives in the back on One Win Way,
Right.
he's been impacted too, and John and I, and anybody else is welcome to go, but John and I are going there Thursday at 11 because he wants to show where it's coming onto his property. But that was part of the enforcement order. It's like, we want you to delineate, and I don't remember what the date was we gave him to
Gotcha.
come, but.
So we'll know after they delineate.
Okay, that's it.
No other business?
No other business.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I told you.